The Civil Rights Movement of 1964 outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national orientation. No longer could blacks or other minorities be denied service simply based on the color of their skin. The act also barred discrimination by employers and labor unions and created an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission within the power to file lawsuits on behalf of aggrieved workers. While people tend to think of this solely as an act to benefit the African American community, they fail to recognize that it brought more freedom and opportunity for women as well. Yet, contrary to popular belief, it did not bring an end to discrimination.
This is an example of what life was like prior to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. During January and February 1965, King and SCLC led a series of demonstrations to the Dallas County Courthouse. On February 17th, protester Jimmy Lee Jackson was fatally shot by an Alabama state trooper. In response, a protest march from Selma to Montgomery was scheduled for March 7th. 600 marchers assembled in Selma on Sunday, March 7th, and led by John Lewis and other SNCC and SCLC activists, crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge over Alabama River en route to Montgomery. Just short of the bridge, they found their way blocked by Alabama state troopers and local police, who ordered them to turn around. When the protesters refused, the officers shot tear gas and waded into the crowd, beating the nonviolent protesters with clubs and ultimately hospitalizing over 50 people.
Bloody Sunday was televised around the world. Martin Luther King Jr. called for civil rights supporters to come to Selma for a second march. When members of Congress pressured him to restrain the march until a court could rule on whether the protesters deserved federal protection, King found himself torn between the request for patience and demands for the movement activists pouring into Selma. King, still conflicted, led the second protest on March 9th, but turned it around at the same bridge. On March 21st, the final successful march began with federal protection, and on August 6, 1965, the Federal Voting Rights Act was passed, completing the process that King had hoped for. Yet Bloody Sunday was about more than winning a federal act. It highlighted the political pressures King was negotiating at the time, between movement radicalism and federal calls for resistance, as well as the tensions between SCLC and SNCC.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 also paved the way for two major follow-up laws, one being the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which prohibited literacy tests and other discriminatory voting practices. The other being the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which banned discrimination in the sale of rental and financing of property. Though the struggle against racism would continue, legal segregation had been brought to its knees. Following Kennedy's assassination in 1963, Martin Luther King Jr., with the assistance of President Lyndon B. Johnson, worked together to press the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. MLK served a big role in the passing of the law due to his determination of nonviolence and equal opportunity. His I Have a Dream speech was a sign of strength and determination towards the cause and led to the bill being passed in 1964, with support from many other civil rights activists.
Ideals of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 relate to today's current issue of the unequal treatment of men and women. The definition of gender equality is the equal representation and treatment of women and men. Specifically, not one country in the entire world has achieved gender equality, which is a growing concern in today's society.
Men have started to take a stand for women discrimination and support the other half of humanity. Emma Watson, Goodwill Ambassador for UN Women, has stood up for her gender equality by starting a solidarity movement known as the HeForShe campaign. MLK is like that of Emma Watson in the HeForShe campaign. Both of these leaders show commitment to their cause and sacrifice everything for the good wealth of their people. Emma Watson was the only one who initiated HeForShe campaign and continues to lead and encourage men all over the world to take a stand against women discrimination.
This movement was originally conceived as a struggle led only by women for women, yet recently men have begun to stand up in addressing inequalities and discrimination faced by women and girls. According to the HeForShe website, the goal of this movement is to unify our efforts, bringing together one half of humanity in support of the other half of humanity for the entirety of humanity.
The commitment of gender equality can only be taken by men showing their dedication to supporting women's equality. Over 270,000 across the world have taken this commitment, and over 43,000 within America. Sadly, countries such as Russia do not have any men who have taken this commitment. This is an example of a country who is unaware and does not include all men in a fight against inequality. The commitment specifically states, gender equality is not only a women's issue, it is a human rights issue.
Many people believe that gender equality is not relevant to the United States. However, if a man and woman are working in the same position, the man would receive higher pay. The difference in rate of pay is an example of inequalities Americans deal with, while the Eastern world deals with violence, domestic abuse, and lack of education.
More severe cases of inequalities are demonstrated in Asia and the Middle East. Women face restrictions on driving, clothing, and the right to divorce, and the access to education, custody rights, citizenship, and most visibly are victims of violence. This demonstrates how the Civil Rights Act of 1964 has been enforced on a low level within the U.S., but must expand to other parts of the world in order to solve the issue dealing with equality.
Although this is still an ongoing issue in today's society, as a whole we are making leaps and bounds to stand up for equality across the board. There is still more we can do. Make a personal commitment to treat everyone as your equal. Agree to stand up for injustice when you see it. Your skin color does not make you superior, and neither does your gender. Men, agree to work alongside and fairly treat your female colleagues. Take the HeForShe commitment and mean it. Ladies, show society they were wrong in thinking of you as lower class. You are able to make a difference and be a figurehead in the workplace and community. We are the next generation that can bring an end to injustice.